So here we have a cube. We've talked about already before, using our horizon line and vanishing points to create it. Now we're going to talk about shading it in so it looks more solid. So the first thing we have to do is figure out where our light source is coming from. With this particular one, I'm going to think of the light as being out here kind of to the right of it, but it's hovering out in front of it. So just to help me remember where my light source is, I'm going to actually draw a little sort of partial sun to illustrate where that light is so I remember. So the first thing I'm going to do is construct a cast shadow. The cast shadow is a very important element in that it helps to really relay the form back to the viewer. So when I do my cast shadow, what I want to think about are first each of these corners on the box. And each of those is actually a stick. So if I were just going to draw this stick stuck sort of in the ground here, and I had my light source up here, this stick would cast a shadow out like that across the ground surface. So we're going to draw each of these corner sticks, we're going to draw their cast shadow. So we're going to come out with a horizontal line that is parallel to the horizon line from each of these corners, like this. Now this particular one, if we drew this line out, it would be inside the box. So therefore it's not really going to be relevant in this case. So we're not going to worry about that one. He gets left out on this. Alright, so we've got a nice horizontal line coming from each of these corners. Now we're going to draw and relay the direction of the light. So our light is out here. So from each of the top of these corners, we're going to lightly draw a line that is at about a 45, anywhere between 30 and 45 degrees out from the top of our corner, and we're going to draw it down to where it intersects with that horizontal line we drew sort of on our ground plane. Alright, so now I've got my first one established, so now I'm going to come back to the second corner, and I'm going to draw another parallel, or a line that is parallel to the first one I drew, so it's at the same exact angle. This one's not coming in shorter here or going out longer. It's parallel to that first line I drew, and I'm going to draw it to where it extends and hits the line on the ground. And come back to the one at the back and do the same thing. Now you'll say, okay, why are we doing that one when it's going to be behind the box? Well, it's still very important, and it's why we draw through our box, because it helps us accurately construct our shadow. So we don't want to forgo this one on the back. It's very, very important to get a very accurate cast shadow that looks as though it's laying down on the surface that the box is sitting on. So now you can see I've got this point of intersection here, here, and here, and when I go back and complete this shadow, all I'm doing is connecting these dots. So I'm going to go back this way, and if I actually extended this back, it would go back to my vanishing point. And then I'm going to connect this one here, and this too would also go back to this vanishing point. So now I've got a cast shadow created for my box, okay, which is very important. But we also want to go ahead and put some value and shading on the box itself. So in order to do that, we're going to think about this box having three different values. Value 1 is our lightest value, and because our light source is up here above the box, the value 1 side is going to be the top of the box. Value 2 is sort of our medium value, which will be right here, and value 3, our darkest, which is away from the light, will be right here in conjunction with our shadow. Alright, so I'm going to start with the side that's darkest first. And I'm not going to start super, super dark, because I can always go back and add value to it. But that's just where I like to start first. And there's no rule of thumb as to where you have to start, but that's where I'm going to start first. Now I'm using a colored pencil, and you can use a colored pencil or regular drawing pencils to shade, but notice how I'm actually kind of laying mine on its side just a little bit so that I can cover more ground. I'm also able to blend the lead just a little bit easier there. And I'm just going to start off by laying a pretty even layer of value across this side. And I'm moving my paper around to help make it easier as well. I'm just going to fill that side in with my value 3. Okay. Then I'm going to come into my value 2 side, and this, remember, is just a little bit lighter. So notice how I'm kind of not going back and forth like this, but I'm sort of swirling it around. We don't want to see real distinct pencil strokes because those can sometimes affect the perspective of the drawing. You know, a lot of times when we're shading things, our wrist is like a hinge, and we want to shade things, and they start getting these little arced lines, and that suddenly makes a flat surface look as though it were curved or arced. So very important to use more of a swirling method for shading things in. All right, so now I've got my value 3 and my value 2. There's not a whole lot of difference, so I know I'm going to have to come back and add more value to my value 3 side, but let's go ahead and get a little bit on the top. This is going to be our lightest value, so I'm really just going to lay in a little value at the very back, leaving the top surface the lightest, so that we have our area of highest contrast with this leading corner right here. All right, now we've got very uniform values sort of laid out here on our 3 and our 2. We're going to think about some of the environment and how that's going to affect this cube as well. So when something is laying on a surface, we have light not only coming from the light source, but also reflective light. So if this is a white surface, it's going to reflect light back onto our box here. So knowing that, we would know that this area here would be getting some of that reflective light, which means we could actually build up a little more value then on this corner. And that just starts to create a little bit of a little variety. It's not just a uniform plane of value, because things just generally are not like that in the real world. Okay. Now to counterbalance that, I'm going to do the same thing on the other side, my value 3 side. Now it's not reflecting the table surface, it's actually going to be reflecting our cast shadow, which we'll fill in here in a minute. So this area in this corner then, turn it upside down, will actually become darker because it's reflecting our cast shadow. So you can see now why too, I kind of started with the uniform value knowing I was going to come back and add more to it. But notice how we're getting more of a distinct difference now between those two sides. Bring it back around this way. But I am still keeping it lighter down in this corner. We're going to see why that is here in a moment. So now I can balance it out by just adding a little bit more value down here. And so notice that, you know, our box isn't just this uniform blah value 3 and blah value 2, but we're even, you know, adding some more value within those sides. Now, let's talk about the cast shadow. I left this area a little bit lighter because our darkest value of all is actually going to be our cast shadow. So we don't want this area that's touching the cast shadow to be super dark, because then we're going to lose the definition of the box. So we're going to start with filling in our cast shadow, and that's going to be the darkest value of all. And we're going to keep it darkest closest to the box, because shadows have a tendency to get lighter as they move further away from their actual object. So we'll go darkest next to the box, and notice how that is helping to define the box as well. Not just an outline, but the two values next to each other. This lighter value next to the darker value is what is creating the definition. And then gradually our shadow can soften up and lighten up as it moves away. It's not a super tall item, so it's not going to get completely faded out, but it's darkest next to the object. And then two, because it's sitting right on a surface, the darkest area will actually be a little bit of a line right along the ground, like that. And it's actually going to come across this side as well. So that's just right where that box touches the ground. There's a little bit more of a stronger cast shadow. And we can go in here and darken this up. So our area of highest contrast is going to be right up here at this top corner where our three values come together. And there we have a shaded cube.